Welcome to the Food Bloggers Table. Pull up a chair for authentic conversations and actionable advice from fellow food bloggers and industry experts. I'm your host, Jen, and I create custom food blogs designed to earn top-tier ad income. Join us now at the table as we break bread and build brands. Plugins are wonderful when they work and not so much when they don't. And plugins are notorious for not playing well together. So which plugins should I avoid? Are there specific ones that I should steer clear of?
That's hard because it's based off of site and what they're doing and what they have on there. Jetpack's a big one that could be okay, but it could also be terrible. And that plugin is so large and it has so many modules in it. And it's really not as nice as it used to be. So that's probably one that I would avoid now, especially now it's on a paid model for the majority of people. And even if you think that you might not have the traffic or visitors for it, when they talk about paid model, they're talking about if you plan on having ads or you have affiliate links, anything that makes money from your site, you are a commercial site. You're not a hobby site. So they did that with their Akismet anti-spam plugin 2 years ago, and they slowly started canceling people's API keys that were free. And so that's like your anti-spam for comment spam. It's quite popular. And then they went to a paid model. And now Jetpack Stats has gone to a paid model. And so that's one. Some people love those stats. So if they really love them, then you just got to go turn off all the modules. But if they don't need them, then get rid of it.
Right.
So that's a big, if you want stats, it's two good plugins that are like WordPress plugins. Is Independent Analytics is a good one. These are not free, but they're relatively cheap. And then Analytics WP is another one. These give you analytics right inside of WordPress, and they break it down basically because they can see your posts and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit more informative than Google Analytics might be. So those are nice options. There's so many.
What about Monster Insights? Because that's one I see a lot.
Oh, yeah. So Monster Insights. So
I'm not a big friend. Asking for a friend.
I'm not a big fan of Monster Insights because it's so large and unnecessary for Google Analytics.
Okay.
It's such a large plugin. Now, it does have some really nice integrations if you're using like WooCommerce. It can give you some nice information that way, but it's big, right? It's a big plugin. And the problem with Monster Insights is that it installs all these other plugins. A lot of people don't realize that it installs like user feedback, WP Forms, Opt-in Monster. They're all owned by the same company.
Okay. And
they do it in this nice little way where they do ask you to install it, but it's like, do you want these recommended things? And a lot of people just go, oh yeah, recommended. And it installs like 6 other plugins. So a lot of times now, people have started with Monster Insights, and I'll go check their site, and now they have 2 SEO plugins. They'll have Yoast, and then they'll have all-in-one SEO, and they're fighting each other.
Yes.
And they're like, wait, I didn't install all-in-one SEO. And I'm like, I bet you did, but you didn't even realize it. And then I know if I see Monster Insights in there, I go, there it is. There, that's where it's from.
Yeah.
So if you have another analytics system, if you have the Independent Analytics or Analytics WP, or you're using Microsoft Clarity, or just for Google Analytics alone, if you don't really need to see the data inside your WordPress and you can go to Google Analytics, which is what I would recommend, you can get rid of Monster Insights and install the code in your theme or some other header and footer plugin or something like that. So yeah, I don't like Monster. and the same thing is Exact Analytics, which is now owned. They're both owned by the same company. They're like the exact same thing.
Oh, okay.
They used to be separate, completely different, and they got bought by the same company. So I will often see people have both of those installed. They have 2 Google Analytics installed. I'm also not a big fan of Google Sitekit, which is also Google Analytics. It stops tracking often. It's just completely unnecessary to log in and hook into your search console. While all that information is fun to have inside of WordPress, that information lives outside of WordPress that you can easily access. So you don't need to be bringing that in.
What about people that installed it, again, asking for a friend, for people who installed it because they didn't know how to manually install Google Analytics. And then of course, G4 comes along and you're like, what the heck? And so then it's a whole thing. And you're going, well, I'm terrified to turn it off because I don't want it to quit tracking my analytics for like Mediavine or my ad network or, whatever I may need to be tracking for. What would be your suggestion, I guess, for people that have all that in there, but they don't know how to extract the information and then manually install G4, Google Analytics, whatever?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's like a nuanced question because it's really hard depending on the site, right?
Okay.
If you have a site or a theme that has like a header and footer code section in it, like Cadence Pro has it or Genesis has it by default, some others just have it. You can add the Google Analytics tracking code, which you can get from your Google Analytics, is under the property, under the data stream, and it's the measurement ID, and you can install that. If you want to go for just a lighter plugin and you don't have something like a Cadence Pro or Genesis or something, you can just install like a header and footers plugin.
Okay.
I like WP Code Lite. It's
Mhm.
free. It used to be called Insert Headers and Footers, but now it got
Yes, they
rebranded.
changed the name on that. Yep.
So that one has two sides to it. It's got code snippets and it's got headers and footers. You can use that because you're going to have to put other things in your header, verification codes, probably some other affiliate tracking scripts or something. You're going to be putting stuff in your header. But yes,
Okay.
Pinterest pixels, whatever it may be, you're going to be putting things in your header, and you don't want to be editing the theme code.
Okay. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
don't do that. That's bad. It will not stay, stuff like that. So typically have an insert headers and footers plugin and put the code in there.
Okay.
And that is a lot lighter and doesn't run a bunch of JavaScript on the front end and stuff like that. So that's what I
So
would
that should
recommend.
help with site speed and those sorts of things as well without having those big bulky plugins that have all
Yeah.
the junk in it that you don't even need.
Yeah. There are
Okay.
others that are a little bit lighter if you just want it just specifically for Google, but I would try to get one that you can do multiple things in, so you
Mhm.
don't have to do like a headers and footers plugin is used a lot on a lot of people's sites if they don't have one that has the ability to add headers and footers. So that's where I would go with it. I would try that. I do see a lot of issues, and this is not that the plugins are bad, but Pinterest hover pinning is becoming a really large pain.
Yes, I was
Um,
wondering. I was actually going to ask you about Pinterest pinning and that sort of thing because I know
yeah,
there's so many of them.
Yeah, there's so many, but we're seeing now that they'll either conflict with each other or they don't pick up images because you're lazy loading the images, which is good for site speed, and Pinterest can't handle lazy loaded images. Or we've seen this constantly where even some of the best plugins for Pinterest pinning are actually blanking out the image, meaning the image doesn't load on the site
Hmm.
anymore,
Hmm.
even though it's there. So we're seeing that kind of stuff. Pinterest pinning images is really nice. It's also a large pain because they don't play well with optimization
Okay.
often. And that's probably another one. Optimization in itself is a good thing,
Hmm.
but a lot of times people double up or triple up on optimization plugins.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have multiple lazy loading features, which often causes images to also not load. They have multiple image optimization plugins, which
Hmm.
are like triple compressing an image, and you get like
Oh gosh.
really
God.
grainy images.
Hmm.
Or plugins that do similar things that are also doing them at the same time. JavaScript optimization, CSS optimization. So you just like it would be good if you checked over your plugins to make sure you don't have like multiple optimization plugins in there. I'm trying to think some of the ones that really page builders, even though you can classify some of like the cadence blocks and
Hmm.
the spectra blocks and stuff like that as page builders, those are extending the core blocks,
Right.
Gutenberg block editor blocks. When I talk about page builders, I'm talking about Beaver Builder, Elementor, WPBakery, which is a visual composer is what it used to be called. Those are often just nightmares to deal with because they have so much going on with them that sometimes it'll load correctly, other times it'll just be a broken mess. Elementor has gotten really bad with that lately with their updates. Their updates
Hmm.
have been not as good as they used to be, and they're
Hmm.
rushing things out and
Ah.
things get broken. Luckily for the majority of things, again, if you have backups, if you have solid backups, you can restore and go
Hmm.
back. But page builders are not the nicest. And then to be honest, like SEO plugins are important. They're good to have, but you could do some damage by checking the wrong things.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
there's a lot of stuff in there that's a lot more advanced than people realize. And unless you know what you're doing outside of the basics, don't just go checking boxes.
And I tell my clients, as far as SEO, Yoast SEO does everything you need, and the free version is perfect. Unless you're
Yep.
doing more complex stuff, most likely you're doing things outside of the plugin itself. You're searching keywords. Just use the basic Yoast SEO and leave it alone because more plugins for SEO doesn't up your SEO.
Yeah, like we see people put like a schema plugin on top of
Mhm.
Yoast or RankMath, and they already have schema in there. You don't need another thing putting schema in there. That's just too much. I will note that be careful with RankMath in regards to people turn on the analytics feature, and that analytics feature brings a ton of data in from your search console, and it does fill up databases quite quickly, especially
Okay.
depending on if your site is very active. So I do not recommend that feature being turned on because
Okay.
I've had to clean out a lot of site databases that have ballooned in massive size because of the amount of data that comes over. And you don't really realize it until it has hit the tipping point. They just get shut down, their site shuts down, or like
Oh,
gets
geez.
so slow. If they have a good host that like scales with them, some of the good hosts will just reach out to them and say, hey, your database is massive. What happened? And it's almost always that. Or there's some other plugins like Top 10 or Track My Stats or something that are just poorly written. The independent analytics and stuff like that, those go into the database, but they are actually really well optimized. So it doesn't
Okay.
fill up the database time, and you can actually set it to trim data after a certain amount of time.
Oh, okay.
But you often don't need to. So it's pretty well optimized. These others are not optimized at all. And so they're just filling up the database with IP addresses and all this data.
Geez.
And it's just getting inflated and it comes down crashing. And then probably some of the biggest ones that cause the most issues is e-commerce plugins. A lot of people start out blogging. They start out blogging and then they go, you know what? I want to add a shop.
Right.
Or I want to sell something. And they add it right onto their main site. While the idea of that is great, when you go from a site that's functional as a blog and it's got plugins and all this kind of stuff, and you try to add in e-commerce as an extra, you're going to have a lot of conflict.
Okay.
Because there's things that you need to set up for e-commerce to work well, and sometimes it won't work well on your current site. So if you want to do that, typically we recommend installing e-commerce on like a subdomain or a different domain. And the reason is that now it's contained in itself. It's got its own database. It's got its own set of plugins. And while it might seem like it's kind of terrible that you have to go manage 2 sites, trust me when I say it's going to be much easier to diagnose and deal with the e-commerce site and the blog site completely separate.
Gotcha.
If you're doing a very small shop, 1 or 2 like digital downloads, that doesn't really matter.
Right.
But if you're trying to do like a functional store, you have to realize that to have a really good functional store on like WordPress requires a lot of plugins.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
It's not just 1 or 2, it's a lot of plugins. And when I talk about fully functional store, I'm talking about ones that like run really well, good for user experience, upsells and all this kind of stuff. All of those things matter. And you will end up with a site that probably has like 55 plugins just on the e-commerce.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that the number is bad. It's just that if you want all these features, a lot of times you have to add those plugins. So you're trying to add that to a site that already has 25. Then you're up in like the 75, 80 range.
And it's kind of like drug interactions where you don't know which thing's messing up. So now you've got to go diagnose 85 different plugins to figure out it was the last one, because it's always the last one or the next to last one every single time. And instead of saying, okay, my blog's fine, but my shop, something's wonky here. Like you said, you can make a clean separation.
It's just much easier to clean things up that way and not have both things down at the same time. That's the biggest recommendation I would, because e-commerce, although nice, doesn't play well when you have a fully functional site that's running okay and you're trying to jam an e-commerce shop in there.
Gotcha.
So when you're trying to set that up, just think of the future, what you're trying to do. What are you trying to do with this e-com shop? Is it just 1 or 2 downloads? If so, use something like Payhip or some like external site where they can deal with the taxes and all this other kind of stuff and just link to that.
Gotcha.
Or I know people go like Etsy or Teachers Pay Teachers, like something like that. I know people are like, well, they take so much money. You don't realize how much work it takes to run a fully functional shop.
Right. And legally, it can get really hairy, especially if you do physical products, because that was something that I toyed with at one point, was physical products. And then I was like, oh, I never thought about the tax situation.
Digital downloads are taxed in a lot of different states now in the United States and in the EU. You have to charge VAT tax in the EU, and then you have to also, if you have over a certain amount. Now, I'm not a tax lawyer, so don't.
Sure.
If it's over a certain amount.
Disclaimer.
I'm not a tax lawyer. If it's over a certain amount in the EU, you have to have a jurisdiction there, and you have to have a license or whatever to pay that tax.
Wow.
And now there are different ways that you can make that easier on your life. But again, if you're using a service like Payhip, I think it is, or SendOwl, they handle all that tax stuff for you. Okay. So you pay a fee for convenience.
But it's well worth the fee
that's
not
what
have the headaches.
Yeah. The Etsy's of the world, the Teachers Pay Teachers, yes, they take a percentage. But if you ever have run a store fully, you know that there's a lot going on. And as you said, most people don't realize the legal aspects of running a store.
Right.
It's a lot more in depth than you would ever imagine. I started one in 2004 and ran it for 5 years, and it was probably the craziest time of my life. Best learning on the fly.
No more, absolutely.
Yeah, I would not do e-commerce, at least not in the niche I was in. I wouldn't do that again. I know a lot more now, and the systems are so much better than they used to be.
Oh yeah,
It was atrocious when I was doing it. So I know we got off a little tangent on there, but
but I think it's important. It's an important conversation, and I think it still goes back to plugins, because in essence, what we're saying is, if you do want to sell stuff, you're going to have 142,000 plugins, or the alternative being having a separate shop or doing, like you said, a subdomain, which may be another conversation for another day. Like if people are saying, hey, I really want to know a little bit more about this whole shop building, what you would suggest for selling
Yeah.
products, we may have you back over here on the podcast to talk about that, because I'd love to get your insight on that. So if you had to pick 3 plugins that you would say are probably the best plugins for every site to have, and obviously specifically like for food bloggers, are there any that you would say over and over again, they really don't disappoint? Like they're the ones that I recommend over and over again.
So the 3 that we install on everybody's site that's food related is going to be Yoast. This could be RankMath as well. Those two go relatively interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
A top SEO plugin. Those
Mm-hmm.
two are really good and they keep up with stuff. WP Recipe Maker is the gold standard of recipe sites. While there are some others out there, that is the one that constantly gets updates. The developer is probably one of the best in the game, WP Recipe Maker. And that one does have a free version, but if you want really good
Yes.
features, you're going to want either the premium or the pro, or you can even go to elite if you want to do like recipe collections
Right.
and stuff like that. So that is another one. And then you're going to need some type of social sharing plugin. Hubbub Pro is a good one. They do have a light version. NovaShare is another good one. This just allows people to share your stuff on social media. While there is debate on if that is effective or not, if you don't give people the ability to share, they're probably not going to do it on their own.
They're not going to do it on their own.
So, just make it easier for them. Reduce the barrier to entry, because you can't do all the sharing yourself. You need other people. You need your community to do it for you.
Exactly. It's like, I can tell you that I'm great all day long, but you're going to believe it more if it comes from somebody else. So
I mean, those are probably the 3 that I would recommend. And then a backup plugin. We'll just throw that in there. I'll throw that in there.
What would be your backup plugin? Do you have a favorite one?
So the free and easiest one is Updraft Plus.
Right.
So you can hook that into Google Drive, Dropbox, several other instances of offsite. The caveat to that one is that it has to download your whole site to the web server at first before it pushes it off.
Okay.
So if you don't have enough disk space on your web server, it won't finish.
Okay.
So that's a caveat. There are others that do something similar. Our service, we have one. It doesn't do any backing up on the server itself. It just pulls. Like copies files. So like we use something like that. There are also other services. Blog Vault is one. These are all paid. CodeGuard is another. And then some hosts actually have paid services separate from what their hosting one provides. So you can look at that as well. Yeah. So if you're running a recipe site, you're going to want an SEO plugin, a Yoast or RankMath, and then like WP Recipe Maker by far is the one I would recommend.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Food Bloggers Table. I'm your host, Jennifer Holt, and I look forward to serving you in the next episode.